I'm Natasha Kaufman, and welcome to my podcast, Don't Just Talk, Say Something, Lessons on 20 Years of Business. Over the past 2 decades of running my public relations firm, NKPR, I'm so grateful to have met, worked with, and learned from so many talented industry leaders. And I'm so excited to be able to share their stories and life lessons with all of you on this podcast. Matt Basile is quite easily one of my favorite people ever. Matt is a chef, author, entrepreneur, and most importantly, super down to earth. The founder of street food brand Fidel Gastro, Matt took his background in advertising and paired it with his passion for food. The result? Food trucks, a restaurant, TV appearances, cookbooks, catering, and so much more. We share a love for food, building brands, and for following our passions. Here's our conversation. We met like a few years back, and I tried your tuna, and we became fast friends ever since. I remember, what I remember actually so much about that night is just how kind, and yes, your food was awesome, but how kind and lovely you are. And it just makes you think, and one of the things that I wanted to touch upon with this podcast in particular, because every episode is all about like what are the key learnings. Sure. And I felt with us, it was, you never know where a relationship is going to go.
It's so funny you say that too, because there's 2 people in this relationship. So we both had our own perspectives about that evening, right? And I remember being super concerned because you were a vegetarian at the time.
Yes.
And I don't believe... I think I knew you were a vegetarian, but I don't think I had my biggest concern is that you were not going to have enough food. And now that you know me so well, that's still my biggest concern all the time,
true.
right?
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, I'm really worried that I'm not going to have enough food for you. And we had just met. I don't even think I knew your name at this point. And at the end of the night, you would come up to me and you were like, oh, by the way, my name's Natasha. I do a lot of events. Maybe, I'll give you a call. And I'm like, okay, I hear this a lot, when I'm at an event. And then, you followed me on Instagram, I followed you back, and then I'm like, oh, no, she really does a lot of events. And that was kind of, the beginning of our relationship. I feel like that was about 5 years ago now.
It was 5 years ago, and I was, there are a few things I was impressed with, obviously, just who you are at the core, but also I loved your presentation. It was the way you presented the food. And then as I got to know you, I realized that you're actually more of you're a marketer. I mean, you're a copywriter. That was your background.
Totally.
Tell me a bit about how you went from copywriting and marketing to, I think, just being one of the greatest sort of, you're such a great chef, but you're also
My unicorn? Am I a unicorn?
You are. Well, you are, because you have an incredible mind for creating new products, businesses, just kind of bringing it all together. But how did that even happen?
Well, first off, I'm so hearing you say such kind words means a lot to me, because I feel the same about you. So that's why we have such a great, I think, relationship. I think it comes down to, I never wanted to be a chef. I never sat in a family member's restaurant and saw them work the restaurant life and then said you know what, I want to be that. That was never something that was on my radar. What was on my radar was love and respect for food as a whole, and that was ingrained in me from probably as early as 3 years old. I and my family, we had a level of respect for food and bringing people together at a table, and which is so funny because you can attest better than anyone. My favorite thing to do is to cook for 10 people. You know what I mean? Not big, even though I've done the big events, I love to cook for 10 or fewer. At a table. You
like feedback. I don't know if a lot of chefs do, but you actually
don't.
You really want feedback. You're always asking, what do you think? Do you like this? And I've never actually... I don't think a chef has ever asked me what I think.
But if you think about it, that's part of the creative process, right? Yeah. Is if you're in a creative room now, so put my other world into the mix, which was advertising and marketing, where you're pitching an idea and you need people's perspectives in order to make sure that it comes out the best possible way. So fast forward now to my early 20s. I'm in university. I'm working, like all my part-time jobs were always in food, whether it was butcher shops or grocery stores, working the breakfast shift at my university. Not because I loved it, it was just easy for me. Like working in food didn't take any real mental like space in my brain. I could do it, I could do it well, I could work hard, and then I could focus on schooling. So I was getting my degree. I fell in love with advertising and PR actually in university because I found myself disagreeing with so many people in these like critical theory classes. Being like, everyone's like, the media is the devil. I'm like, I don't think the media is the devil. I think it's a matter of perspective, and I disagree with 90% of people's opinions in here. So from there, I went to college. I went to Humber College after university, and I did a very intensive like copywriting course because I was always a very creative idea person, but I can't draw. Like I'm not good at art. So
but good with words.
I'm good with words. So my dad was an art director when I was growing up. And he was like, listen, I think you have a great mind for the business. He's like, you'll never be a graphic designer or an art director. And I fully knew that. But then, he's like, have you ever thought about being a copywriter? I'm like, oh, I don't want to work in legal. He's like, no. Copywriter means you write copy. And I'm doing research on this. I'm like, oh, this is a job that I could easily do. And I've never even heard of copywriting.
That is the challenge with a lot of young people, right? You don't know all the careers out there that you could possibly get into. No one teaches you. No one tells you about that stuff. Yeah.
Which is really what school should be about.
Yeah.
Right. And I was actually on a podcast yesterday talking about how I was never motivated by grades in school. Like that was never my motivation, which is always why like I took what I needed from education and then I moved on to my next project.
Yeah.
So years later, I fell in love with big ideas. And that's what really got me hooked on the world of advertising. What I really started to resent about it was how people would take your ideas and manipulate them and change them. And next thing you know, the junior who did all the grunt work is not getting any of the respect at the end of the thing. And I had a hard time with that. So I was like, okay, what are my big goals? Because I'm only 24, 25 at the time. I'm like, I know I want to be an entrepreneur. I think I am the personality that needs to not necessarily run a massive company, but I need to work for myself. And it's like, well, what does that look like? Do I want to run an ad agency? I'm like, I don't think anyone's going to buy a 30-year-old or a 25-year-old junior writer becoming an ad. So what can I do? And food kept becoming the only possible next chapter of my life. Because everyone around me was like, you are so incredible at putting food together for people. How is this not something you do for a living?
It is interesting that you have to pay attention to what's around you in order to help direct you to where your life is supposed to go. Because you sort of had one idea for yourself, but food, and you said this earlier, food has been a part of your life constantly. While you were in university, it was part of your day-to-day life, but you weren't actually thinking, well, that's a direction that I might want to go. And so it just goes to show, and I've always thought that, think about your earlier life. What interested you the most? What did you surround yourself with? And that is often sometimes a direction you need to take.
You're spot on with that. And you often talk about being a good listener. So it actually forces you to listen to the life you've had up to this point, right? And so all the signs were there, Matt, like you should probably get into the food business to some capacity. And in the beginning, that just meant opening up a sandwich shop. That's what was my big goal. I came up with this fun idea. It was called Fidel Gastro's. I was going to do Cuban sandwiches, which wasn't really, that popular at the time, at least not here in Toronto. And then all my other menu items were going to be iterations of that. And then, so I put together a business plan. I'm like, okay, great. This is what you do.
When did the Netflix show happen?
That happened years after.
Okay.
That was like 3 years later. But the Netflix show happened because I failed. So
that's interesting.
I took a business plan to a bank for a sandwich shop called Fidel Gastro's.
Yeah.
And they rejected me in 18.7 seconds because I had no experience. I had no equity. I had no money and nothing. I had a good idea on paper, which is what being a junior creative guy
Yeah,
is, right?
yeah.
Good idea on paper. So it was after that, I got rejected. I went home, and in my mind, the idea was done. I was going to go back to my job on Monday, like nothing happened. Went to a party in the beaches.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of local music talent there, so they had a live bar there, and they had DJs there, and people were rapping and breakdancing. It was quite lively, and this is when I used to go out and do things. But so someone was like, they were going to order pizza, and the guys in the band knew that I was a really big cook. Like I used to do all the barbecues with them, and they were like Basile, 'cause that's how they would say my last name, Basile.
I said it right.
You said it right, by the way. So they would go,
Basile.
Basile, what if we give you the money and you go in our fridge and cook whatever you want? I was like, oh, I'm cool to do that. So it was an open concept kitchen, similar to like what you have here. And I'm cooking, and there's like 2 people watching me, and then 4 people watching me, and then 10 people watching me. And next thing you know, 30 people are watching me. And I'm feeding them. And they're all like, it became a part of the party.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe that's the business model. So I went home that night, still, from enjoying that party vibe.
Yeah.
And I rewrote the business plan, scaled it way back to it being more of like an experiential business based on not having a sign and a door, but just going places and cooking for people.
Yeah.
That was the new business. And I quit my job, and then away we went.
And you had a food truck.
Then the food truck
came.
came. Like about, almost a year later. At the same time, social media in local businesses, specifically in food, was really starting to take off. I can't remember the last time I've opened up my Twitter account, but back then, Twitter was how
That's how I started too. Yeah.
Right? Like that was it. And so I started getting a lot of social media attention, which then meant getting a lot of like national media attention.
Yeah.
I was, next thing you know, I'm on global news, and I'm on morning shows, and I was like, what is going on right now? Like, I'm just selling sandwiches illegally off tables, and all of a sudden there's all these cameras in my face. So a production company got wind. They said, well, do you have an idea for a show? I said, follow me around for a day, let me know what you think.
Yeah.
And that was it. That's how that story really took off.
I mean, it's so interesting when when we talk about what are the learnings and what are the lessons, you need to keep moving forward. I think that's the goal. Like you said, I had to fail in order for that show to happen, but you didn't fail.
Right.
What happened was, because I don't believe in failure, I actually believe like that was an interesting learning. You're like, okay, well, the bank shut the door on me, but what's the opportunity?
Right.
Because there always is one.
Totally.
It just might not be that exact opportunity, because that might have stifled your growth. Because what you would have done with that is, and you did, you eventually opened up a restaurant, but you actually ended up closing, like you ended up selling the restaurant because you realized, ooh, I actually want to do bigger things than just be in a restaurant every single day.
1,000%. I actually opened up Lisa Marie, not even knowing I was opening up Lisa Marie. Like that, I signed a lease on a restaurant in Toronto, which in my opinion is one of the toughest restaurant markets in North America. Without even a concept, because what Lisa Marie was nowhere near what that first initial sandwich spot concept was, right? Like that was closer to what our food truck was, but this was now a full restaurant, a bar, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but there's a camera in my face all the time, and I need to keep feeding the machine, and that's all. That's what it was. Like I needed to show that I wasn't just playing around and that I was for real. So I was really just looking for a kitchen for my food truck. That's it.
It's interesting because I have to say I do miss Lisa Marie, although I'm grateful that I still have access to you on a regular basis, because the Nutella s'more pancakes are like heaven.
So that was off our brunch menu, which is really interesting because it goes back to what you said earlier. Brunch was always my favorite meal, and Lisa Marie ended up being known for being a brunch place. Even though we did dinner 6 nights a week and brunch only 2 days a week, people knew us as a brunch spot.
Oh yeah, I always went in for brunch. It was like Saturday or Sunday brunch. So when you think about, our relationship, and it's, our relationship isn't just about, I mean, certainly I'm grateful that you host most of our events. So I'm very happy about that. But it's also, we bounce so many different, ideas off of each other, and we've both grown so much, I think, in business over the last,
sure.
5 years. What would be, couple of your learnings that, through this relationship that you've had.
Specifically with you, you mean?
Yeah.
So this is there's been multiple times where either I've approached you or you've approached me about a larger business play. Knowing full well that even if it didn't work out, we still had each other's backs as friends.
That's true.
And that to me has always been, because I actually don't like to get into business with friends. I find it can change relationships. However, there are always exceptions. And I've always felt like you've been the exception to that rule. Whether or not things have panned out the way we had originally talked about or planned out, it didn't matter because I knew at the core our relationship as friends was solid. So we could have an idea, we could put our friendship aside, work on a concept, and if it didn't work, great. We were still friends afterwards. And that's not easy. I actually think that's a much harder thing for people to do because so often a relationship can get soured when you throw work into the mix into it because they're different.
For sure, but there's a reason why everything happens. I really believe that, and so it's interesting, and you know, I know what you're talking about, which is we almost did a sauce line together.
A few things, sauce line.
True, a few things.
And then there was the other restaurant.
Oh yeah, that's true.
There was that.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So and even smaller things like, hey, you introduced me to someone about another project I'm working on.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
There's been multiple junctures where there's been opportunities for us to do actual work together.
Yeah. But they've always led to something. Like I know with the sauce line, the great thing that happened there is you ended up selling Lisa Marie just before COVID.
I did.
And
it was
like,
all
the timing
happening.
was just incredible. Like, and so I very much feel, and you know, one of the things we've talked about on this podcast in the past was you need to really pay attention to the signs and the people you surround yourself with. So people will come into your life, and that's not a choice, but whether they stay in your life is a choice. So
Great.
Be really mindful of who you surround yourself with, because I think those are the people that help you become who you're meant to become.
And to piggyback off of that, I did not listen, when we first met, I thought you were great. I'm like, I love this person. She's so awesome. And she's so kind. But then, like, you kept inviting me back to do more dinners. And all I kept thinking to myself was, but she knows a lot of chefs. Like, she doesn't need to keep coming back to me. Like, realistically, you didn't. Like, you know, at some point, I'm like, I wonder why Natasha keeps asking me to, like, yeah,
I really
we're
like
friends.
you. I just think you're so nice.
And I never, and I, you know what, like, I should have realized that in our first or second meeting. But then, like, at some point I remember you looked at me like, you're like, Matt, like, you don't have to, like, you can let your guard down a little bit. Well, because when I work, I like to keep it as professional as possible.
Yeah.
Even though I've been cooking for you for years now, and we are genuine friends. When you invite me into your home or into your event space to work, I treat it just like that.
Yeah.
But then I remember you were like, Matt, come on, it's my family. Like, just chill. Like, have a beer. You want a beer? You want to relax? Sit down.
Well, my brother-in-law, who doesn't like anybody, like loves you. So I mean, that says a lot. And he really doesn't like anybody.
He actually doesn't like anybody. He's told me many times he doesn't
it's
like anybody.
It's true. Favorite memory of favorite memory.
Well, so I have two.
Yeah.
The first being the one you just kind of touched on, when your brother-in-law grabbed me by the arm and he would not let me go to let me know how good the chicken was. His chicken is so good, it's so juicy. Like, he's just...
And
like,
he's so critical, like, really never has anything nice to say.
His kids looked at me and were like, we don't know what you did to my dad, but like we don't know what you did, you know? So that's one. The other one being when you invited me to cook for your and Eric's wedding here in the backyard, it was such an intimate setting. There was 4 people.
Yeah, that's true.
Justin, Jess, you
Yeah.
guys. And then you asked me to cook for you. And I felt like not a caterer that night, but I'm like, oh, I'm actually, without getting ahead of myself, like, I almost feel like Natasha and I are probably family at this point.
Yeah. I mean,
And
that's why we asked you, because you to us, you are family. And that's exactly it. We wanted something so intimate that was just about us. We threw a party, you know, weeks later, but that moment was just about us.
It was beautiful.
It was just important, you know. Someone, I'm going to ask you a question after, but someone had asked me, I always end the interview with, ask me something, because I'm going to give you some time to think about it. Ask me something that you've never asked me before, and that you want to know about me that you don't know about me.
About you.
Yeah. And so one of the guests had asked me, well, how many times have you been married? Everyone wants to know how many times. And it made me laugh because I was like, okay, fair question. I mean, it's not like J-Lo amount of times. Yeah. But so marrying Eric was very emotional for me.
Sure.
Because I wanted it to be just about us and not a PR move or it was intimate for me. And so when we asked you, it was exactly for that reason, because you are family, and that evening was very, very special.
And like, without overstepping, like, I was kind of in your life in transition mode when you were going from one place in time to another.
It's true.
And I really, I saw that, and I was like, I don't know how often the caterer is so happy for the bride, but like, but I was so happy for you to be happy. Like, that was my big thing. I'm like, Natasha looks so happy right now.
Well, happiness.
And now I'm happy for her.
It's interesting because happiness is one of those things where different things make you happy, I guess, at different times. I always struggled with, where's the fine line between career, work, and life? And I've always talked about, work-life integration. I believe in that, and I do believe in that. But I was starting to make decisions that I was making work decisions in my personal life as opposed to what actually fulfilled my heart. And there was something about COVID that gave you the opportunity to step off that treadmill and just really focus on.
We all stepped off the treadmill during COVID.
But it was important because it made us sort of rethink, what does happiness mean to me? Because it's different for everybody.
But you also just, so took my last 10 years in a nutshell and summed it down into one sentence. Because I was every bit of that, right? Where, and maybe that's also why I've always had such a strong connection with you, is that I've used you as like my moral, personal, and business compass. Mm. So I think about like decisions that I make, and I go, if I were to let someone know about this decision, what would my mom think? What would my dad think? What would Natasha think? I'm serious. Like, and that is a genuine. So I've also recently just made a lot of huge changes in my career because I was ready to, and I think that's part of trying to figure out. Like, when you said the words work-life integration, and even the way it came out sounded like a strategy that you put on a board, right? Like, and whereas I was like, I think I just need to live a little bit more. Yeah. And that doesn't mean I'm going to work less. Like my nono, who he passed away about 10 years ago, but he was my everything. He taught me life and food and how to be a decent human being. He taught me everything. And his words to me were always work hard and be smart. And I think I did a really good job of the first part of that for the last 10 years. I've worked my ass off for the last 10 years. Yeah. Now, in the last year and a bit, even you could argue since I sold Lisa Marie, but really now, I'm focusing on the be smart part of that equation. Because, listen, I'll be 37 this summer. People still can't believe that I opened my first restaurant at 28, like self-financed by like one small business loan, and that was pretty much it. Like, it was, so I feel like I've put in my time, like my 10,000 hours. I hit that my first week, like owning a restaurant. So now I have, I haven't even like publicly said it yet, but I'll say it on your podcast. I'm happy to. Yeah, why not? So I've recently just decided to. But you were one of the first people I messaged. I've recently just decided to step away from my own catering company, from the Fidel Gastro's brand.
But you did say you were always still going to.
I said I will always cook for you in your backyard, so don't worry. But that was a big step for me to, move away from my food truck business, move away from my large-scale catering business, and now focus more on more intimate projects and large projects too that I'm really excited for, that are all in the food space. And I think it comes back to the very first thing we talked about in this was, how can I utilize what my strengths are? I came from a world of advertising and a world of food passion. And I think doing the things I've been doing are what has been expected of me in food. Those are the expected moves.
Yeah.
right, to grow your food business. The unexpected moves are the ones that I'm doing now. And I think that's what separates me from a lot of chefs in this business, is that I've always seen the food business as that, as a food business. It is not just an opportunity to sharpen your knives, go in the kitchen, do a dinner service, and then do that on repeat for 10 years in a row.
Well, all of our biggest asset or commodity is time. So how are you going to spend it that will actually sort of get you to where you need to be? And that's the way to look at it. Like, that's the big picture.
I couldn't agree more. Time and energy are so finite.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm old, I'm saying as I get older,
Yeah.
you recognize how valuable it is. Because I remember being 28, working 16, 18-hour days, 7 days a week. I'd put a badge on, like it was something I accomplished. Now I'm just like, what was I doing? Like,
at that time, that made sense. And, as you get older, you just need to think about how do you want to spend your time. It's your biggest asset. So how are you going to do that? Okay, so you've had a little bit of time to think about that question.
Right, yeah. Man, to be honest, like, I feel like we've always had a very open book relationship. So I feel like I knew all these other things so I'd like to just take it as to, and I ask people this all the time. If you had to eat one thing for the rest of your life on repeat, no variable, like this is the one thing you can have for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It would be a Lucky Charm Rice Krispie Square.
Like, that's what I love about it. Because, I always tell people there's Natasha and then there's Natasha. I remember we've done events here where, we're doing like really beautiful poke bowls, and then in comes the Dairy Queen blizzards. Oh my God.
Well, and you know why that would be my favorite dessert? Because it has the crunch. Sure. Because I feel like, okay, I couldn't live without crunch. Right. And then, but I feel like texture's important, but I feel like there's a grain in there. Yeah. So it's probably sort of good for you.
And then you got your sugar, so you can still work out.
You have the sugar, exactly. Yeah. And then you there's the marshmallows, which would be really nice. Like they're really cute and pretty. To be honest,
I didn't think you would say it. I thought you were going to say mac and cheese.
So I really like mac and cheese. The problem with mac and cheese is it would just... because I've been on keto for so long, I've had to modify my mac and cheese to cauliflower mac and cheese.
That's just a gratin.
So it's not the same. So I just don't think I could do it because it just makes me sleepy. Whereas this, I feel like I can manage with this.
That's amazing.
And I love dessert. So I could eat dessert, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so it had to be a dessert. But I also realized being on keto, I miss the crunch. I like the crunch of things. And so I...
texture is really important to people in food. That's why so many people have a hard time eating oysters. It has nothing to do with them being tasty and everything to do with the texture of them, right?
Squeamy.
I love the texture of them. I think I like to drink my food. It's like
you like to drink your food. You're like, Eric, that's so funny.
But cheeseburgers are mine. If I had to have one thing for the rest of my life, it would be a cheeseburger, house ground beef, beautiful melted American cheese, potato bun, the whole thing, fries, and then chocolate milkshake. That's my.
I love that. We complement each other. I can give you the dessert.
Yeah.
Following that.
Crumple that up, put it in my milkshake, and then all of a sudden it's a dessert.
True. Maddie, thank you. Thank you so much for being part of the last 20 years.
First off, I gotta say, as an entrepreneur, to be in business for 20 years is no small accomplishment. So you should be very proud of yourself and your accomplishments and the team you've built, because it's no small task. And the other part is I'm just honored that of the 20 years you've been meeting millions of people and that you've selected only a few to talk to. It means a lot to me. So I want you to know that.
Thank you. I think it's so important to remember that when one door closes, you look for the next opportunity. Because like I said, there always is one. I can't wait to see what exciting project Matt cooks up next. And I can't wait to eat some of his delicious food soon. I always love hearing from you. Feel free to DM me at Natasha and KPR. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review and rating. Until next time.